In the heart of South London, where the hum of city life never truly fades, a quiet woman, and she was invisible to most people. A whisper behind a counter, a stammer in the back of a pub. Her name was Katrina Flynn, 36, soft-spoken, living in a cramped council flat in South London. She worked nights cleaning the same comedy club where the man who'd later betray her got his first laugh. He was the rising star, Nate Larkins, a stand-up comic with the swagger of someone who'd never heard no. The kind of man who could charm a crowd in seconds, or destroy someone with a smirk. He met Katrina after a set when she nervously complimented his act. She didn't know that smile he gave her. It wasn't kindness. It was calculation. She left him small gifts. He accepted them. She wrote him heartfelt letters. He read them aloud backstage, mocking the handwriting. "My devoted muse," he'd joke to the staff, waving her words like a punchline. They laughed. He laughed louder. Katrina didn't hear the laughter, but she felt it every time he didn't answer her messages. He strung her along, breadcrumbs of attention. A reply here, a photo there. She believed they had something real. In truth, she was never a person to Nate, just content. A gimmick, something to mine for jokes and fuel his persona as the tortured comic. Then came the Netflix deal. Baby Reindeer was a smash hit. Critics raved, audiences wept. Nate was hailed as brutally honest. But behind that honesty, a lie, a big one. Because the show's stalker, Martha, was Katrina, and almost none of it was true. In the show, she was violent, obsessive, dangerous. She'd threatened his family, assaulted strangers. It was all fiction, wrapped in the branding of based on true events. By the time the show hit its third week, Katrina's face was splashed across message boards and TikTok sleuth threads. She was hunted by the public. She lost her job. Her flat was vandalized. She tried to speak out. No one listened. Why would they? Nate Larkins was the victim. But here's what no one knew. Katrina had been keeping records. Everything. Every text he sent, every voicemail, the late-night requests, the flirtation, the blurred line between intimacy and manipulation. And she wasn't the only one. 2 years before the show aired, a waitress named Amira had filed a quiet complaint against Nate for predatory behavior. It vanished. She left the club. He stayed. 3 months later, a comic named Jordan Keyes tried to expose Nate for stealing material and sleeping his way through the scene under false pretenses. Jordan's career tanked. Nate's Netflix deal went through. Pattern, silence the weak, reward the charming. But Katrina? She was different. Not because she was brave, because she had nothing left to lose. In a twist worthy of his own script, Katrina contacted a former private investigator named Eloise Vane. Eloise had been disgraced years earlier, set up, framed in a corruption scandal. She'd vanished into the underworld of freelance digging. She agreed to help Katrina, pro bono. Why? "Because I know what it's like to be erased," she said. "And I know a liar when I see one." Together they built a case. The final blow? A deleted voice memo Nate had sent Katrina years ago, half drunk, confessing their game, urging her not to take his rejection seriously. "It's just content, Kat. You get it, right? We're artists, no feelings." It was damning. Even worse for him was the original email pitch to Netflix. In it, Nate explicitly described the stalker character as a fictionalized woman I once dated, a fan who misunderstood things. He'd never been stalked. He just needed a villain. The documentary aired 1 year after the series ended, titled Baby Liar, The Truth, Nate Buried. Audiences were stunned. The real Katrina cried on camera as the world watched the woman they'd mocked reveal the full, painful truth. Nate denied everything. He claimed it was all a smear, until Netflix, facing mounting pressure, released the original legal memos. They knew. They'd always known. They'd signed off on the fictionalization, knowing Katrina was real. Lawsuits followed. Katrina's name was cleared. Nate lost his agent, his shows, his platform. The tables had turned. But here's where it gets dark. 2 weeks after the documentary aired, Nate Larkins disappeared. His last known sighting was outside a pub in Camden, drunk, alone, arguing with someone in a hoodie. Security footage shows him stepping into a black van. He never came out. No ransom, no body, just a smear of blood on a pavement behind the pub. And silence. Some say he ran. Some say Katrina had him killed. But here's the final twist no one saw coming. The footage, the person in the hoodie, it wasn't Katrina. It was Eloise Vane. And that's where our story turns. Because Eloise disappeared that same night. 2 people. Gone. One known for lies, the other known for uncovering. And the last message ever sent from Nate's phone was to Katrina. One chilling line. You think you've won. But you never understood what this really was. The van was found 6 days later, abandoned in a parking garage beneath a condemned housing complex in Hackney. The interior was stripped, bleached, not a drop of blood inside, but under the mat in the back corner, a single silver earring. It matched the set Katrina Flynn wore in her first documentary interview. But here's the catch. She swore she'd lost that earring a year earlier. Detectives were called. The media pounced. The narrative turned fast. Was the victim now the suspect? Was the stalked now the stalker? Or was someone framing her? Katrina refused to speak publicly again. She moved to Scotland, off the grid. But behind the silence, something darker brewed. Because weeks before Nate vanished, Eloise Vane had begun digging into his past. Not just the women he'd hurt, but the people who'd covered for him. And what she found would have ruined more than just a career. An old friend from university. A producer at Netflix with a sealed sexual misconduct report. A private PR firm paid to scrub Nate's online history for nearly a decade. And one more name. Detective Harry Blease, a name Eloise had circled in her notes, a name tied to 3 dropped complaints, and one open internal affairs file from 2017 that mysteriously disappeared. When reporters went looking for Blease, he was already gone. Early retirement, no interviews, no trace. But guess who used to work under him? The first officer assigned to Katrina's stalking report years earlier. It wasn't just a failure of justice. It was an orchestrated silence, a cover-up. And Eloise, she was preparing to blow the lid off everything. On her laptop, recovered from a safe deposit box registered under a false name, investigators found a file labeled Red Deer. Inside, emails, contracts, photos, and a video, just under 7 minutes long. Time-stamped the night Nate Larkins disappeared. The footage shows a dimly lit storage unit. Nate sitting in a chair, hands zip-tied. Not bruised, not bleeding, but angry. Across from him, off camera, Eloise's voice. You thought you could ruin her and walk away. You thought truth was something you could script. Nate laughs, nervous. You're not going to hurt me, he says. You're not a killer. You're a failed PI playing vigilante. Long pause. Then Eloise responds. You're right. I'm not going to kill you. But I know someone who already thinks you're dead. The screen goes black. Authorities still don't know what happened after that video. There's no footage of him leaving, no trace of where he went. But the file contained one more thing. A signed statement from another woman, name redacted, former club employee, sworn testimony that Nate did coerce Katrina, that he bragged about using her for material, that he celebrated the public turning on her. It was the final nail in a coffin no one had buried because no one wanted it to exist. Public opinion shifted. Again. Katrina was no longer seen as a stalker or even just a victim. She became something else. A symbol. of what happens when the voiceless are mocked until they scream. But symbols are dangerous. They can be twisted, weaponized, used. Just ask the last person who tried to make her a character in his story. 1 month later, Katrina broke her silence. A single interview, audio only, no video, no location disclosed. Her voice was steady, measured, quietly defiant. "I didn't kill him," she said. A pause. "I didn't have to." Another pause. Some monsters vanish when you stop feeding them attention. But the host asked the question everyone wanted answered. "Do you know where Nate Larkins is?" Silence. Then the soft sound of her breathing. Then, "Wouldn't it be more terrifying if I didn't?" The interview went viral. Netflix was hit with 3 lawsuits. Eloise's file was leaked in full. The case was reopened. But Nate Larkins remained missing. Dead? In hiding? Held somewhere? Orchestrating his own disappearance? No one could say. But here's the last twist. 2 days ago, a package was delivered to a London journalist covering the case. No return address. Inside, an old, worn-out VHS tape, labeled in Sharpie, "Rehearsal tapes, Baby Reindeer pilot." On the tape, Nate, alone, practicing his opening monologue. He breaks character halfway through, looks at the camera, grins, and says, "This story ends when I say it ends." So the question is he a victim, a villain, or just a master storyteller who finally went too far? The Scottish Highlands, isolated, brutal, beautiful, the kind of place people go to disappear or make sure someone else does. 2 months after the VHS tape arrived in London, an anonymous tip reached a Glasgow journalist. "Check the estate near Loch Arkaig, the one with the Red Deer gate." The reporter, Finlay Grant, had been chasing the baby reindeer fallout since the beginning. He'd interviewed former comics, bar staff, and even a Netflix assistant who said the network had doubts about Nate, but the views were gold. So when the tip came in, he followed it. What he found changed the story. The estate was listed under an LLC registered in Malta, connected to a shell company in Belize. But the land records told a different story. The estate had been purchased 4 years ago, not by Nate, not by Eloise, not by Katrina, but by Stella Lyndon, a name buried in Nate's past, a name never mentioned in the show. Back in 2012, before the comedy clubs and fame, Nate had a different name, Nathaniel Carter. He'd dropped the surname when he rebranded as Larkins, but school records still existed. So did a forgotten court document. At age 21, Nathaniel Carter had been issued a restraining order by a woman in Edinburgh, a fellow student, his ex, Stella Lyndon. It never made headlines. The case was sealed. But the restraining order? It was granted, and that's where things begin to unravel. Stella Lyndon vanished in 2014, reported missing by her sister. No signs of struggle, no foul play, just gone. The case was closed as a voluntary disappearance. But Finlay discovered something chilling. 2 months after Stella vanished, Nate Larkins debuted at a club in Soho under his new name. Same face, new life, clean slate. So how did her name turn up now? Because her bank account, frozen for nearly a decade, suddenly made a transaction, a payment, to the estate near Loch Arkaig. Finlay reached the property after 2 days of hiking, 2 fake names, and 1 bribe. He wasn't prepared for what he saw. The main house looked abandoned, empty, windows shuttered, gates rusted. But deep in the forest, near the loch, a second cabin, modern, warm lights glowing. He approached quietly. Inside, a man, scruffy, thin, gaunt, face partially obscured by a beard, but unmistakably, it was him. Nate Larkins, alive, sitting at a desk, writing, speaking into a microphone, recording something. Finlay got closer. Through a cracked window, he heard the words, "They all think they know the ending, But this was never a story about a stalker. It was about obsession. Theirs, not mine. Katrina, Eloise, Stella, you, all watching, all feeding. Finley pulled out his phone to record. The light snapped off. The door opened. A silhouette stepped out. Not Nate. A woman, tall, hood up, eyes locked with Finley's. She whispered, "He told me you'd come." Finley ran. The next morning, he filed his story. But before it could go to print, his laptop was stolen. His car broken into. The estate burned to the ground 2 nights later. The fire brigade called it an accident. Locals called it a warning. There were no remains inside, no trace of Nate or the woman. Only a message spray-painted on the ruins. "You're telling it wrong." The incident exploded across social media. Theories spiraled out of control. Some said Nate was building a cult of women, twisting them the way he twisted Katrina. Others believed Eloise and Stella had turned the tables and were keeping him trapped, living his own fiction. But the most chilling theory, that Nate never left, that every leak, every clue, every twist was part of his next script. Because buried in Eloise's Red Deer file, investigators found a list, a series of dates, coordinates, journalists' names, and at the bottom, Finley, Highland Reveal, Act 3. He had predicted every step, scripted his own disappearance, engineered the fall, built the myth. Even Eloise, for all her digging, might have been playing a part in his game, because the last page of her handwritten notes contained one line: "We are all in his show now. The world is watching. Katrina has gone silent. Eloise is still missing. The estate is ash. And yet, a new podcast launched last week titled Reindeer Season 2. The voice, unconfirmed, but eerily familiar. Episode 1 ends with, "The real stalker was never outside the window. It was behind the camera, holding the pen. Stella Lyndon. The missing girl who was never truly missing. Because the moment she vanished, a monster was born. Before the world knew Nate Larkins, before Netflix, before the monologues and interviews, there was Stella. She was the first woman who said no. No to his obsession, no to his revisions of reality, no to becoming his material. And for that, she disappeared." Glasgow PD quietly reopened the case after the fire at Loch Arkaig. They traced Stella's last phone ping. It was never in London, never even near Nate. It was in Wales. 4 hours before she vanished, she'd placed a call. 1 minute, 13 seconds. No recording, no transcript. But the number? It belonged to Eloise Vane, meaning Stella never vanished alone. A private investigator hired by Stella's sister followed a new lead to an abandoned hostel outside Aberystwyth. There, beneath loose floorboards in room 6B, an old duffel bag. Inside, a driver's license issued under the name Anna Shepherd, a journal, and a burner phone with only 2 saved contacts, E and R. The phone was dead. The license expired. But the journal. That was the beginning of the unraveling. The journal revealed a chilling alliance. Stella hadn't just gone into hiding, she'd orchestrated it, with Eloise and someone else, a third person she referred to only as Rook. Page after page, she chronicled the manipulation, the gaslighting, the pressure to stay silent. And one line kept repeating, "This time, we write the ending." That line appeared again, this time scrawled in black marker across the wall of an abandoned theater in Manchester, the site of Nate's first Baby Reindeer live preview show. Spray-painted beneath it, a crude drawing of a red deer skull. Antlers cracked, eyes crossed out, and a date. June 12th. The internet went into meltdown. What was happening on June 12th? A leak came from a Netflix insider. A secret Season 2 episode, never approved, never discussed publicly, had been uploaded into their cloud system under a dummy project name. Encrypted, undisclosed, and yet waiting. The leak was pulled within hours, but not before a single frame made it online. A darkened stage, a single chair, and a voice that whispered, "You thought you knew what this was. You thought it ended with me. But I was the decoy, the ghost, the beginning. You watched me burn, but you missed the match." Then silence, static, a flash of coordinates. The coordinates led to a publishing house in Edinburgh, a real address, real office. But it had been shut down for over 3 years. When police arrived, they found a locked basement door. Inside, a wall covered in Polaroids, faces, women, all connected to Nate, some known, some not. At the center, a photo of Stella, eyes cut out, the word author scribbled in blood-red ink. And one more note. The script was always hers. You just didn't read the subtext. Stella Lyndon was never the ghost. She was the architect, the one who saw the monster being born and decided to trap him in his own myth, with Eloise as the face, Katrina as the spark, and herself as the shadow behind the curtain. But here's where it gets darker. The publishing house basement also contained dozens of scripts, untitled, unpublished, unfinished, but each one detailed events from the last 2 years. The disappearances, the interviews, the twists, each written before they happened, as if someone had scripted reality itself. The final script, dated 2 weeks from now, June 12th, titled, The Final Monologue. It ends with a single line. When the truth takes center stage, who survives the curtain call? Netflix has gone radio silent. Scotland Yard is under pressure to issue warrants. But here's what's really terrifying. A new email campaign has begun. Subscribers across the UK are receiving an unlisted video from an unknown sender. Subject line, Red Deer Rising. The video shows Stella, alive, clear-eyed, speaking directly to the camera. She says, "You made him famous. You cheered when we cried. You called it entertainment. Now, we're writing the sequel." The hunt for Rook led nowhere for months. No trace of their name in Eloise's official files. No photos, no paper trail. Only passing references in Stella's journal. Always coded. Rook holds the key. Rook will decide when the curtain drops. Even Nate was scared of Rook. That was the only description ever given. And it changed everything. Because Nate Larkins was never afraid of anyone. Until now. In the days following Stella's video leak, Scotland Yard launched a classified task force. Cybercrime, organized subcultures, digital footprints crossing 4 countries. But the breakthrough came from something no one expected. A pawn shop in Bristol. A retired audio tech brought in an old 4-track cassette recorder. Said he bought it for cheap off a woman in Glasgow 3 years earlier. Inside the tape deck, a single cassette. Label torn, blank on both sides. But when techs restored the audio, they heard his voice. Nate Larkins. And for the first time, he wasn't performing. He sounds tired, scared. The voice shakes, not like his usual controlled tone. This was something else. A confession, a breakdown, a warning. It begins mid-sentence. It was never supposed to go this far. I made a character, not a confession. But the audience, they wanted blood, and I gave it to them. I thought I was writing about my trauma, but I was just repackaging someone else's. I took Stella's story, then I twisted it, because it made me the hero. Long pause, breathing, a soft, painful laugh. And then she came back, and she wasn't alone. Rook doesn't want revenge. Rook wants symmetry. Then, a name. Rook is static, indecipherable audio. Then the tape cuts out. No last name, no location, but a word whispered twice at the very end. She's watching. The tape ignited an investigation into former students from Nate's early days at the Soho Theater Lab, an advanced acting course he joined after Stella's disappearance. Out of the 12 original members, 4 had changed names. 3 had left the country. 1 had died under mysterious circumstances in 2018, but one name stood out: Ruth Keller, an experimental playwright, brilliant, erratic, known for work that blurred reality and fiction. She left the London scene abruptly. No explanation, no forwarding address. But her last play? Never performed, never published. Title: Red Deer. The script was recovered through her former agent, and its content? Unbelievable. It's a perfect recreation, scene for scene, of events from the baby Reindeer show, months before Nate ever wrote it. Same beats, same dialogue, same characters. Only one thing changed. The roles were reversed. The stalker was the hero. The comedian was the predator. And the final monologue, delivered by a woman in antlers. She ends with the words, "The deer never stalks." She waits until the hunter can no longer tell if he's holding a gun or begging for his life. Ruth Keller, R.K. Rook, the architect, the ghostwriter, the missing link. She had known Nate, loved him, feared him, and when he stole her story, she vanished into fiction until it was time to rewrite the ending. Authorities now believe Ruth, Stella, and Eloise formed a pact. 3 women with pieces of the truth, each betrayed in a different way, each underestimated. Eloise took the risk. Stella went underground. And Ruth? She built the theater of justice, one where Nate Larkins would never know if he was acting or confessing. But here's the twist. A new podcast appeared this morning. No name, no title screen, just a black background and a voice. A man's voice. You think they broke me? You think this ends with a cabin, a confession, and a fire. But you missed the rehearsal. Then laughter. Then silence. Then the sound of a door creaking open. And someone whispering, "Welcome back, Nate." The IP address traced to a network in northern Germany, near a rural town called Grunwald. Locals report seeing a tall woman in a long coat, always alone, always watching, sometimes writing in a red notebook. But no one knows her name. Only one person left a description. She said she was working on the final scene. She told me, "When it airs, the truth will finally be unwatchable." June 12th. The date circled in Stella's journal, scrawled across the burned ruins of Loch Arkaig, encoded into Nate's podcast leak. The final monologue was coming, but no one expected where it would premiere. Not Netflix, not a theater, not a podcast, but live. At a comedy festival in Berlin, billed anonymously as Red Deer, a story you know. A one-man show. No poster, no press, no ticket link, just a time and a room. When authorities arrived, it had already begun. The crowd was silent. Dozens seated in a dark room with no stage, just a single chair under a flickering light. In it, a man with a hood over his head, camera on, streaming to a closed server, one audience, one performance, and then he spoke. The voice. Nate Larkins. But different, fragile, fractured. This is the part where I say I'm sorry. Not because I am, but because it's expected. You came here to see a monster bleed, so here it is. He pulled the hood back, hair matted, eyes glassy, a man unraveled. I didn't lie to you, I just cast the wrong people. Gasps in the audience. A few cameras rose, but one woman in the second row stood, calm, poised, antlers pinned to her coat lapel. Stella. The lights flickered again, and another woman entered through the side, clipboard in hand, hair tied back. Eloise, followed by a third figure, long coat, red notebook, face mostly hidden. Ruth Keller. Rook. The women flanked him, and for the first time, Nate went silent. Eloise stepped forward. You stole stories, you turned our pain into punchlines, and then you asked for sympathy. Ruth opened the notebook. We gave you a stage, and now you will give us silence. Then Stella leaned close. This is not revenge, it's authorship. They played one final clip. previously unreleased, captured on CCTV inside a production office months before the Baby Reindeer series aired. Nate is seen cornering a junior writer, pleading, begging. "If this goes wrong, I'm done. Help me spin it. Lie if you have to. I need to stay the victim." He turns to someone off screen and says, "They'll believe anything if you make it sad enough." The room froze. Nate looked out at the crowd, tears in his eyes, but no one applauded. No one moved. No one believed him anymore. Ruth closed the notebook. Eloise said nothing. Stella turned away. And Nate? He stood, walked to the center of the room, bent the knee, and whispered the only honest thing he may have ever said. "Tell it your way now." The lights cut out. The stream ended. The room was cleared. When police entered, Nate was gone. The chair was empty. The women vanished. Only one thing remained: a printed program left on each seat. On the cover, a silhouette of a deer. And one sentence: "The victim is whoever controls the narrative, until the narrative learns to speak back." Berlin police declared it an unauthorized performance. Netflix denied any involvement. The footage disappeared within hours, but not before being archived by Rook's team and leaked. 1 week later, a final episode appeared. Baby Reindeer, the red version, privately hosted, untraceable source. It doesn't tell Nate's story. It tells Stella's, Eloise's, Ruth's, and it ends with this: "He made a show. We lived the aftermath. He gave you pain. We give you truth. Not everyone who bleeds is a victim. Not everyone who stalks is in the shadows. And not everyone who disappears is gone." Final fact: 2 days ago, a new file appeared in the UK court records database. Unsealed. Dated 2014. The original restraining order. Filed not by Stella, but by Nate Larkins, against Ruth Keller, claiming harassment, obsession, invasion of his private life. It was dismissed because Ruth never showed up to court. But now we know she didn't have to. She was writing. This is the end of our investigation for now, because justice doesn't always arrive in court. Sometimes it arrives on stage, but one final message was sent to our inbox this morning. No sender, no location, just a 5-second clip. The camera shakes. It's night. A car drives away down a long, dark road, and a voice whispering in the dark. "Act 7 begins soon.